You've probably noticed that K-pop has taken over the world. Well, there's a new reality show trying to create new K-pop bands. But here's the thing. The show invites people who aren't Asian to be in the bands too. Today on the podcast, we ask an important question. Who gets to make K-pop? I'm Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This is Commotion. All right, let's get into it with this. That is TWICE, first single like Ooh Ah from 2015. They've been one of Korea's top girl groups pretty much since they debuted. And the story of how they got there, the story of how they got together is a big part of why they were popular right away. Because there's 9 members of TWICE and they competed on a reality show for a spot on the lineup in the band. They sang, they danced, they modeled, they charmed the audience because you had to. And the reason you had to is because you had to get the votes. You had to get votes from the public and you had to get the approval of the label's boss in order to be in the band. In the world of K-pop, these kinds of survival shows are actually quite effective. They're really effective at launching new idol groups. And now 2 of K-pop's biggest labels are bringing them to North America in a couple of separate YouTube series. One show is called A2K, America to Korea. The other one is called Dream Academy. The big twist is they aren't just casting Korean and East Asian performers for their new girl groups. Young artists of any background have a chance to be a part of these new K-pop girl groups. It's a bold step for K-pop, and a couple of scholars are here to talk about it. Michelle Cho and Crystal S. Sanderson, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to do this. Let's go.
Yes, let's talk.
Yes.
Let's do it. Crystal, I'm going to start with you. There is a bit of a debate over whether K-pop can even be considered a musical genre. How do you distinguish K-pop beyond the fact that it's usually performed in Korean by Korean and Asian artists?
Well, K-pop is a kind of musical tradition that has genres. And so there's K-hip hop, there's K-R&B. So it has genres. I think people tend to associate K-pop just with the idol groups, you know, the groups that sing and dance like TWICE.
Yeah.
But we have had lots of K-pop groups that have had non-Korean members in them. But there's something about the sound of K-pop. It's something about the way that it's produced and the way that it's promoted that makes it distinct even from other music in East Asia like J-pop. If you put a K-pop song and a J-pop song together, people will say that there's a distinct difference between the two. Now, there are fellow scholars out there who disagree. They say that K-pop is just, the K in K-pop is just a brand and it's a kind of manufactured Korean identity. But I'm on the side where I think that language, the Korean language, is really key to K-pop. And that means that if you can get down with the Korean language, then you have a pretty good shot of being able to participate in K-pop.
Crystal, as you were talking there, Michelle was just like nodding aggressively. But is that where you see? Is that how you see it too, Michelle?
Yeah, I think that there is a way that people think that K-pop is just, you know, the K is Korea, and you could say that because the language is so important. But I do think that there's a way of putting these groups together and thinking about a group concept that I think is also a big part of K-pop.
So I want to get to talking about these 2 new shows. They're both using the method of training K-pop stars to develop them as marketable. Let's start with A2K, which recruited artists from the US and Canada. Here's a scene from one of the first audition episodes.
I love you like a love song, baby. I love you like a love song, baby. And I keep hitting repeat, beep, 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 beep. I love you like a love song.
I'm not looking for professionals. We're looking for talented kids with potential. I think you'll be fine.
Thank you.
The judge we heard there is JYP. He's a former pop star that now runs one of the biggest music labels in Korea. Michelle, what is the strategy behind these labels starting with a promising but actually like deliberately kind of unpolished artist?
Yeah. So this story of, you know, the young hopeful transforming into a pop performer.
Yeah.
I think that's like, you know, a story that hits people, that appeals to people everywhere. And so that narrative is really a compelling draw, especially if the goal is for these K-pop idols to stay relatable to their fans. And so I think that's really the core of the strategy. The idea is that, the idol is someone who themselves was a K-pop fan or was inspired by other K-pop artists. And so, this maintains the core characteristic of K-pop as an industry, which is to get fans to get very, very invested in their idol and to maintain this kind of close relationship between fan and idol. So if you think that the idol is a version of you, or you could have been them, then you're going to be all that much more invested.
And I guess part of that is also just like watching that process happen, right? Like, so watching it from the beginning point where you're like, okay, they're still unpolished to get into the place where now they're an idol. Crystal, the other show is called Dream Academy. They recruited contestants from all over the world and they put them through a year of K-pop training before sharing any content at all. Take a listen to this cover of Still Into You.
I should be over all the butterflies. I'm into you. And baby, even on the worst nights, I'm into you.
The format of Dream Academy is quite different from a traditional sort of survival show. Can you describe how Dream Academy works, Crystal?
Sure. So unlike something like A2K, which is at the very beginning of the process, what we're seeing with Dream Academy is an evaluation process that happens after they've had a year of training. And so ostensibly, we should be seeing people who are at a different level of performance, people who are a bit more knowledgeable than, say, that person you picked up off the street for an audition.
Right.
And we really get to hear what the behind the scenes creative personnel who put these groups together are thinking when they're thinking about what makes for a group. And there's a lot of discussion about what makes for a group as opposed to what makes for an individual performer.
Are you finding it effective? Are you finding Dream Academy effective?
I'm not sure.
Wow. Okay. Go off.
I am not sure. I think one of the things that it's really good for is letting us hear what that thought process is behind we want the group to be or to look like or to sound a certain kind of way, and what performer brings that or what performer doesn't bring that. I think it's good for that. But as a person who has watched a lot of trainee video, but also a lot of fan video where you have fans who are doing cover songs and cover dances for performers who have undergone a year of training, I'm not sure if I'm impressed at where any of them kind of start at the beginning of this process.
If folks are just joining in, my name is Elamin Abdelmahmoud, and this show is called Commotion. Today I'm talking with Michelle Cho and Crystal S. Anderson, and we're talking about these two K-pop survival shows, A2K and Dream Academy. Michelle, K-pop groups are mainly comprised of artists from East and Southeast Asia, but these two new shows are casting performers of any background. How do you feel about the diversity that's being represented there?
Well, okay, so it's important to distinguish A2K, which stands for America to Korea.
Yeah.
But as you said, has Canadian and American contestants. So clearly there's kind of there's a blurring here that's going on. And then Dream Academy, which is global, and it uses that word global often in its, self-description. So you have non-Asian contestants, and that's really innovative, and we haven't seen that before. But to be honest, I was kind of surprised that there weren't more hopefuls from like Central and South America, maybe could speak English, but are bringing in representation from that huge Spanish language fandom. And then overall, you have folks who speak English. That seems to be what global means, but non-Asian, which is kind of, like how do we square that, right, with a concept of real diversity? But this is a commercial enterprise, so maybe that's to be expected. Well,
let me put that to Crystal. How do we square that? How do we square that with the fact that they're like, we're going globally for all the people who speak English from all over the world?
Even if you granted them that, though,
Yeah.
one of the things that is important to understand is that K-pop is a global phenomenon and its fandom is diverse, whatever country you're pulling it from. And so when I saw kind of the candidates assemble, I thought that they looked very similar to each other, even though you had individuals from non-Asian backgrounds. And again, I've seen a ridiculous amount of fan video. I've seen, young girls in Saudi Arabia doing cover dances. And so I'm wondering if I'm a young girl and I don't see myself represented in there, but you're telling me that this is representative. So
we should talk about the way that K-pop is spreading its wings outside of Korea, because we're sort of moving the epicenter of it a little bit. And when we should talk about that context, Michelle, because the two Korean labels we're talking about here, we're talking about HYBE, and that's a label behind BTS, and JYP, that's a label behind Twice. They both made attempts and had success at breaking into the American pop music market, for example. The shows are co-produced by American music labels. I think that's important to say. How successful are they at highlighting the Korean roots of K-pop, or are they actually trying to disguise that in a way?
So it's really interesting because the roots of K-pop are kind of in the way that Koreans took American music and sort of made it their own and integrated a lot of American popular music genres. And so if we think about it kind of speaking back to an American audience, it's going to be like, oh, this is real familiar, but there's a twist. And up until now, that twist has been it's Asian performers. This experiment is really interesting because you're taking out that twist in some ways, but it's Korean, the Korean idol system or something that maintains that non-American, non-Western emphasis.
Well, to that point, Crystal, the risk of trying to create something for everyone is that you eventually, or maybe accidentally, end up creating something that serves no one in particular. It just ends up being diluted, and it just doesn't find its audience. Who do you think the audience is for these new girl groups?
The audience for these new girl groups, and Michelle and I talked about this a little bit before, they're definitely younger than what we typically know to be the audience for K-pop. K-pop also has a wide age diversity also. But it does seem to be Western. And that is really interesting given that K-pop spread on the strength of its associations with a specific culture, and that culture being Korean. So it's interesting now that when we're going to make a, quote, global K-pop girl group, that we're going to dilute it, and that's going to ostensibly sell better than the very specific cultural production that K-pop is. I'm not a marketing person. I mean, it might work, and it might definitely work with a younger demographic of K-pop fan who doesn't have a history or the context of all of the 30 plus years of K-pop that went before. Yeah. It could work.
Well, Michelle, to that point, we got about 40 seconds left here, but I just want to ask, the idol groups that are popular here in North America, they're not necessarily the ones that are most popular in South Korea. Do you think these new groups are going to be embraced by Korean fans?
Yeah, I think that remains to be seen. I'm really curious. Younger fans who think about their fandom, younger Koreans who think about their fandom as an opportunity to interact with global fans, especially on social media. I think they're definitely interested, but the non-Korean audience seems to be the target. So maybe the Korean audience isn't that important, but really overall, I'm curious to see how this experiment works to kind of anchor K-pop and the US music industry closer together. Yeah. And so we shall see.
My God, class has been in session. 2 professors talking about K-pop. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Of course. Michelle Cho is a professor at the University of Toronto. Crystal S. Sanderson is a professor at George Mason University in Fairfax, Virginia. One of the shows, A2K, just aired its final episode on YouTube. Congratulations to Montrealer Camilla, who made the final group. She'll debut as part of the girl group VCHA. I'm Elamin Abdelmahmoud. You're listening to Commotion. Listen, not that long ago, I want to say maybe 3 months ago on Commotion, we had a conversation about the rise of words on TV screens. How more and more of us, including me, by the way, are watching TV with captions turned on, even though it's not entirely necessary. I watch TV with subtitles. Like, I can hear just fine, and the show may be in English, but I do it anyway. But what about for people where captions are absolutely necessary? Alison O'Daniel is a visual artist and a filmmaker on the deaf spectrum, and she thinks we should all get used to the idea of seeing text on screen all the time. I asked Alison about her experience of seeing movies at the movie theater. When there aren't open captions on the screen, she uses a device called CaptiView, and she started off by describing what that is like.
I'm going to tell you how it works from my perspective.
Okay, yes.
Is that I walk into a theater, I ask for, the assistive listening device, the CaptiView. A lot of times the people who work there don't know what it is. They have to kind of go ask someone, figure it out. Sometimes I'm asked to give them my license, which makes me
oh my God.
So offended because I would never steal one of these things because I can't stand them. And so then, they give you this big device and it's this basically this object with a big arm on a sort of like bendy, springy arm thing. And then something that almost looks like a visor. I don't even know how to explain it. It's just this big awkward thing.
Almost like a pager screen kind of, right? Like that's, yes.
But bigger. Yeah. And it has like a visor so that, the light that comes from the text on this screen isn't going to bother the people around you.
Right.
But so I take it into the theater, I put the thing into the cup holder, and then you bend it, and it's always it's always loud. It always squeaks. Everybody around you looks at you, and there's, and then you have to position it. Hopefully you're not sitting in a seat where it's going to get in the way of the film. You have to position it, and then you're constantly looking at these words and then at the screen. And so it gives me this headache. I mean, I can't stand the CaptiView.
So I want to come back to the notion of what are the tools that we can implement in here. And one of those is open captioning. But before we get there, let's talk about closed captions and the way that they are currently dealt with. So the idea of closed captions is pretty straightforward, pretty simple. It's to transcribe the dialogue verbatim and capture the sounds that are being heard. But that's not always how it is. Can you just tell us a little bit about that?
It's rarely how it is, in fact.
All right.
I mean, I've watched kind of the evolution of captions. And one of my favorite periods of time was when YouTube captions were just sort of starting and they were just total abstraction. I mean, they were not helpful at all, but they were amazing as kind of an art form, an unintended art form. And then, I've watched a lot of films where what you experience is this really distracting censorship that will happen. Like if there are bad words, cuss words, sometimes they'll be changed to something that makes me immediately wonder why. What is happening here? Is there an assumption that the deaf population shouldn't have access to, what is the sort of value system that's determining this censorship? Like
a morality at play of sorts.
It's very strange to me.
So there are literally movies where the characters will be swearing on screen, but the captions will sort of give an alternate to that. Is that what you're telling me?
Absolutely. And if you're, a good lip reader, which I am, I'm immediately aware, that this is off. And it's on some level, it's kind of funny, but actually it's really more enraging. A more common example is the one that I complain about all the time is a music symbol used for music, like when, lyrics could be absolutely included or even like
a description of a sound.
Yeah. And I always feel like a music symbol, what's being communicated is there's something here, but we're not going to give it to you, or a laziness or a further kind of exclusion. And so it's exclusion that's happening within a tool of inclusion.
Right.
It's confusing. It's distracting. It keeps you from staying with the movie.
Listen, last year, subtitles for the Netflix show Stranger Things, they went viral. I remember this story about them going viral because they had these very descriptive details of sounds. These sort of phrases like wet footsteps squelch. It's a sort of, it's a phrase that you can see and then kind of feel at the same time.
Yeah.
Is that a good thing? Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, that's an amazing caption.
Yeah.
Because it's so evocative,
Yes.
like squelch. It's like almost an onomatopoeic word. Maybe it is. It's also like you can feel that on your foot,
Yes.
as you read that word, you feel it. And so that is like moving into a cinematic space.
Right. Is it ever possible for it to go overboard, do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's been really interesting because I finished in January, I finished a film I've been working on for 11 years. It's called The Tuba Thieves, and the entire film has open captioning. And because I've been sort of developing this language of open captioning in my film, a lot of people have talked to me, or I've been around these conversations happening about, and I'm doing air quotes here, creative captioning. And sometimes I think it's exciting / the cart before the horse. Like we need to have good captioning before we get
too creative with it.
And who's defining creative, and how is that working for a deaf audience? So it's and so also I think there's a thing that can happen where I start to get a little skeptical about the subjectivity of who is describing the sound and how they're describing the sound. And so if something, and also the timing needs to match the film so that I'm not getting distracted either by whether it's censorship, whether it's the gobbledygook of like early YouTube captions, or whether it's like someone's subjectivity where I'm really feeling someone trying to do something kind of, again, air quotes, creative, but actually it's extremely distracting.
Right. Well, I was going to talk about The Tuba Thieves for a moment because your movie had its premiere at Sundance earlier this year. It's coming to Pop Montreal soon. You'll be coming to Montreal soon to show the film. It has these open captions. You do all these interesting things with the text. Sometimes the text shows up in different places on the screen. Sometimes there's a couple of different captions that are telling you what each, side of the screen is doing. There are times where you play around with the spacing of the words and letters, with the timing of when the text show up. When you were designing how you approach captioning for the movie, how did you approach it?
Something really profound happened for me that started me on a path of figuring out kind of my personal language for captioning. And it was that I was trying to describe one of the composers that I worked with on the film is deaf, and she had made sound with her mouth. She hummed throughout. And I was trying to figure out if we were going to need another, like a different track for editing of the sound she made with her mouth and with her throat. And she didn't have it as a separate track. So I asked her if she could recreate it, and she's deaf. And basically her response was, no, I don't know what I did. So I listened to it and I tried to write out all the sounds in order for her to try and recreate it. Oh. And while I was just actually writing out the description, I realized that what I was reading, that I was writing, like the mouth is open, the teeth are open and the lips are closed, or the tongue is on the top of the mouth, or, this sound is vibrating in the back of the throat. It was so specific. And so maybe this is what some people might think of as creative captions. And I actually read it and I was like, no, these are good captions. This is
attention, right?
That I've been missing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a way like that, wet foot squelch, where you experience it rather than just read it and it's intellectualized. I think there is something about bringing the body and the feeling into the experience of the description of sound.
Right.
What was profound about it was that I just realized, wow, I can describe sound as a person on the deaf spectrum. I have this authorship, and that was amazing.
For some people, I think the idea of text on screen, I guess it can be a bit of a hard sell. Some people, I guess, find it distracting. Some people are sort of married to this old idea that if you put text on a screen, that it's going to be a disruption to their experience of the thing that they're trying to watch. How do you think you go about winning those people over?
You just do it. Seriously, they'll get used to it in the same way that all of us who've needed it are used to going into movie theaters. And, I keep forgetting because I've been making my film for so long. I keep forgetting that films don't have open captions. And then I'll go to a festival and sit down and watch an English language film and just be like, oh, I forgot. I can't believe I forgot again. And so it's like, okay, well, you're losing me. I'm going to see foreign language films because at least I know I'm going to get the language,
Alison, I really appreciate you being on the show. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Alison O'Daniel is a visual artist and filmmaker on the deaf spectrum. She'll be at Pop Montreal this weekend for a screening of her movie, The Tuba Thieves. Her film is also screening at the Vancouver International Film Festival, and The Tuba Thieves will also air on PBS's Independent Lens next May. Listen, before I go, we got to give you a big update on a story that we've been following here on Commotion. On Sunday night, the Writers Guild of America announced that it has reached a deal with the studios. After more than 140 days on strike, that is a really big deal. What's an even bigger deal is that according to the reports that are coming out, the Writers Guild got a lot of what they wanted. There are reports of getting more compensations, for example, for shows that are on streaming, or assurances that AI is not going to affect their compensation and their crediting. Look, I'm really excited that this could mean my favorite shows are closer to coming back. That's a big deal because please give me a new season of Abbott Elementary. But before that happens, the leadership and its members need to still vote and accept that deal. So we're going to continue to follow that story. For more on it, you can always check out cbcnews.ca. My name is Elamin Abdelmahmoud. I am absolutely going to be here tomorrow. I hope that you make time for us. I hope that you come back tomorrow and hang out with us again. I think it's going to be a great time. See you then.